Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales that we're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. The first crack in their marriage was subtle, so faint that Anna barely noticed it at first. It wasn't an explosive argument or a betrayal. It was quiet, insidious, a growing void that settled between her and Philip like a shadow. Anna could pinpoint the moment when the warmth of their relationship began to cool. It was after the birth of their second child. Philip's focus shifted almost entirely to his career and the children, leaving Anna to fend for herself emotionally. At first, she tried to adapt. She volunteered at the kids' school, joined a book club, and threw herself into managing the household. But the more she gave, the less she felt seen. "Are you even listening to me?" she had asked one evening as they sat in the kitchen. Philip barely looked up from his laptop. "Of course," he replied, his tone distracted. Anna sighed, staring down at the plate of food she'd cooked. She had spent hours preparing his favorite meal, but it might as well have been a frozen dinner for all the appreciation she received. The first time Anna met David was at her gym. He was a personal trainer, hired to run a new fitness program. His charm was effortless, his grin infectious. Where Philip was stoic and methodical, David was lighthearted and spontaneous. "Mrs. Lane, right?" David had said after their first session. "Anna," she corrected with a smile. "No need to make me feel ancient." David laughed. "Fair enough, Anna. You're doing great, by the way. Most people give up halfway through those burpees, but you powered through." His praise was like a balm on her neglected ego. For the first time in years, someone was paying attention to her. Their conversation started innocently enough, small talk between sets. But soon, Anna found herself lingering at the gym longer than necessary. She told herself it was just a harmless friendship, even as her heart raced whenever David flashed her a smile. The night they crossed the line was both exhilarating and terrifying. It started with an innocent coffee after a particularly grueling workout. "It's nice to talk to someone who actually listens," Anna said, her hands wrapped around the warm cup. David leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "I'd listen to you all day if I could." "You're captivating." Anna's cheeks flushed. "You're just saying that." "I'm not," David said, his tone serious. "Philip doesn't see what he has, does he?" Anna's heart skipped a beat. She opened her mouth to protest, but found herself unable to form the words. Instead, she let the silence linger, her unspoken agreement hanging in the air. From that moment, their dynamic shifted. A lingering touch here, a stolen glance there. The boundaries they once respected blurred until they were no longer visible. David was the one who first suggested they meet outside the gym. "Just a drink," he said, his tone casual. "No harm in that, right?" Anna hesitated, but the thrill of doing something for herself, something selfish, was too tempting to resist. Their first rendezvous was electric. Away from the fluorescent lights of the gym and the prying eyes of neighbors, they could be themselves. David was attentive, showering her with compliments and making her laugh until her cheeks hurt. "Why should you settle for less?" David asked one evening, his voice low and conspiratorial. "You deserve someone who puts you first, someone who sees you." Anna stared into her wine glass, her thoughts swirling. For so long, she had felt invisible. But here, with David, she was seen, heard, wanted. The idea of leaving Philip began as a flicker, a dangerous thought she tried to suppress. But as weeks turned into months, the flicker grew into a flame. And when David suggested they take their relationship to the next level, Anna didn't hesitate. "I have to be careful," Anna said one evening as they planned their first overnight rendezvous. "Philip isn't stupid. He'll notice if something's off." David leaned closer, his hand brushing hers. "Let me worry about that," he said with a confident smirk. "We'll be careful. This will be our little secret." But secrets have a way of unraveling, and neither Anna nor David realized just how closely they were being watched. Philip wasn't a man prone to suspicion. He had always trusted Anna implicitly, even as their relationship became strained. But trust has its limits, and Anna's recent behavior had crossed his. The late-night gym sessions, the hush phone calls, the way she avoided his gaze when he asked about her day. It didn't take long for Philip's unease to grow into certainty. One night, when Anna claimed to be meeting friends for dinner, Philip followed her. From his car, parked discreetly across the street, he watched as she slipped into a cozy bistro. Minutes later, David arrived, his hand brushing against Anna's lower back as they laughed and chatted like old lovers. The realization hit Philip like a freight train. His wife wasn't just distracted or unhappy, she was unfaithful. But instead of confronting her immediately, Philip chose a different path. He would let Anna believe she had the upper hand. He would watch, wait, and gather everything he needed to destroy her carefully constructed facade. Philip's revenge didn't need to be impulsive or messy. It would be cold, calculated, and devastating. The silence in the room was deafening after the sound of the wedding rings snapping under Philip's pliers. Anna's wide, tear-filled eyes darted between Philip and the trash where the mangled symbols of their marriage now lay. "Philip," she began, her voice trembling, "please, let's talk about this. We can fix." "Fix?" Philip interrupted, his tone as cold as a winter wind. "There's nothing left to fix, Anna. You've made sure of that." David, still pale and motionless, finally found his voice. "Look, man, I think we're all just a little heated right now." Philip turned to him, his gaze sharp as a blade. "Heated?" he repeated, a dark smirk playing on his lips. "Oh, don't worry. I'm as calm as I've ever been. You, on the other hand, should leave before I lose my patience." David hesitated, glancing at Anna, who shook her head imperceptibly. Philip stepped forward, his grip tightening on the baseball bat. "Ow! Now!" The weight of Philip's command was undeniable. David backed away, grabbing his bag and muttering a hasty, "I'll wait outside," before fleeing through the front door. Anna's defiance flared in David's absence. "You can't just throw me out of my own house," she shouted, her fists clenching at her sides. "This is my home, too." Philip's chuckle was low and humorless. "Your home?" He gestured around the room. "You mean the home I built? The home where I've worked tirelessly to provide for you and the kids while you entertained your guest? Don't you dare play the victim." Anna spat, her voice rising. "You ignored me for years. You don't get to act like the saint here." Philip's expression darkened, but he didn't rise to her bait. Instead, he walked to the door, opening it wide. "Leave, Anna. Go to your lover. Tomorrow, you'll receive the divorce papers, and you'll learn what happens when you gamble with someone who always plays to win." Philip didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in his study, surrounded by files and photographs, evidence he had quietly gathered over the past several weeks. He had hired a private investigator the moment his suspicions about Anna solidified, and the man had been thorough. There were photos of Anna and David leaving restaurants, entering hotels, even sharing intimate moments in Philip's car, a car he had bought for Anna as an anniversary gift. There were phone records, receipts for gifts Anna had purchased with their shared account, and even copies of text messages retrieved from the cloud. Philip stared at the evidence, his mind racing with plans. He wouldn't just divorce Anna. He would dismantle her. By dawn, Philip had made a list. Expose Anna's infidelity. Use the evidence in court to secure custody of the children and the house. Control the narrative. Present himself as the stable, devoted father wronged by his wife's betrayal. Isolate Anna. Cut her off socially and financially, ensuring she had no foothold to regain control. Take away her support system. Target David, exposing his opportunism and rendering him useless to Anna. The courtroom was a battlefield, and Philip came prepared. His lawyer, Jack Forrester, was a shark, a man known for his ruthless efficiency and unshakable confidence. Anna had hired her own attorney, Rachel Carter, a sharp and determined litigator who specialized in high-stakes divorces. But from the moment the trial began, it was clear that Philip had the upper hand. Forrester began by painting a picture of Philip as a devoted husband and father. He presented glowing testimonials from colleagues, neighbors, and friends. Photos of Philip coaching his son's soccer team, attending parent-teacher conferences, and hosting birthday parties painted him as the epitome of stability. When it came time to address Anna's infidelity, Forrester didn't hold back. "These photos," he said, holding up a series of damning images, were taken over the course of 3 months. "They show Mrs. Lane and Mr. David Hill engaging in an extramarital relationship. But it's not just the affair that's concerning, it's the brazenness. These encounters occurred in the family home, in Mr. Lane's vehicle, and in places where they could have been seen by their children's acquaintances. Anna shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her composure cracking as the evidence piled up. Forrester continued. Mrs. Lane also misused marital funds to support Mr. Hill. Financial records show she spent thousands of dollars on him, money that should have gone toward the family's needs. When Rachel Carter tried to counter, arguing that Philip had neglected Anna emotionally, Forrester was ready. Neglect? He repeated, feigning incredulity. My client worked tirelessly to provide for his family. He supported his wife's interests, bought her a car, and ensured she had every comfort. Neglect isn't an excuse for betrayal. Outside the courtroom, Philip's revenge extended beyond the legal proceedings. He reached out to their mutual friends, sharing just enough of the story to sway their opinions. I don't want to badmouth Anna, he would say, his tone heavy with feigned reluctance. But I think you deserve to know the truth. Word spread quickly. Invitations to social events dried up for Anna, while Philip was inundated with messages of support. Meanwhile, Philip quietly worked to undermine David. He leaked information about David's financial instability and history of gambling to David's clients and associates. Within weeks, David's reputation and his career was in shambles. After weeks of grueling testimony, the judge delivered the ruling. Given the evidence presented, it is clear that Mr. Lane has demonstrated stability and a commitment to the well-being of his children. Therefore, primary custody of the children and ownership of the marital home will be awarded to Mr. Lane. Anna's gasp echoed in the courtroom. Her lawyer tried to console her, but the damage was done. Philip had won. As the courtroom emptied, Philip caught Anna's eye. There was no gloating, no smirk, just a quiet, resolute finality. Philip stood outside the courthouse, the brisk autumn wind tugging at his jacket. The victory should have felt sweeter, but as he watched Anna and David slink away, their faces pale and defeated, a pang of something unfamiliar gnawed at him. Regret? No, not regret. He shook off the thought as his lawyer, Jack Forrester, approached. Well fought, Forrester said, handing Philip a folder with the finalized court documents. You've secured everything you wanted: custody, the house, and your reputation. Philip nodded, his face unreadable. Thank you, Jack. Forrester hesitated, sensing his client's somber mood. This is a win, Philip. Don't forget that. I won't, Philip replied, though his voice lacked conviction. He turned toward his car, leaving the courthouse and the chaos of the past few weeks behind him. Anna stared at the peeling wallpaper in David's cramped apartment. Boxes of her belongings were stacked haphazardly in the corner, a stark reminder of everything she had lost. The children were with Philip that weekend, as they would be for most weekends now. The judge's ruling had been clear. Philip was the stable parent. Anna, by contrast, was painted as impulsive and reckless. David shuffled into the room, his disheveled appearance mirroring the state of their lives. He dropped a stack of unopened bills on the table with a sigh. We're behind on rent, he muttered, avoiding her gaze. Anna clenched her fists. What happened to the money I gave you? David flinched, his guilt written across his face. I made some bad bets. You gambled it away? Anna's voice rose, trembling with fury. I was trying to fix things. David shouted back. I thought I could double it, maybe triple it, get us out of this mess. Anna's laugh was bitter. Out of this mess? You were the mess, David. I left my marriage, my children, for you, and now I'm stuck in this hellhole with nothing. David opened his mouth to respond, but seemed to think better of it. Instead, he grabbed his coat and muttered, I need some air. When he didn't return that night, Anna wasn't surprised. The next morning, Anna checked her bank account and froze. The last of her savings was gone. The reality hit her like a physical blow. David had drained her account before disappearing. Her hands trembled as she stared at the empty balance. Panic set in, followed quickly by despair. She had no money, no home, no support. She thought about calling Philip. She even dialed his number, but her finger hovered over the call button. What could she say? That she was sorry? that she needed his help after everything she'd done? In the end, she hung up without leaving a message. Visitation weekends were bittersweet. Anna cherished every moment with her children, but the pain of saying goodbye at the end of each visit was unbearable. On one such weekend, she took them to the park. They laughed as they climbed the jungle gym and chased each other through the fallen leaves. For a few hours, it almost felt normal, but when it was time to drop them off at Philip's house, the illusion shattered. Philip opened the door, his expression neutral but polite. The children ran inside, their laughter echoing in the hallway. "Philip," Anna said hesitantly, lingering at the doorstep. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "For everything. I know I ruined so much, and I've paid for it every day since." Philip studied her for a long moment, his face unreadable. Finally, he nodded. "I've forgiven you, Anna, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It's better this way, for me and for the kids." His words, though calm, cut deep. Anna nodded, tears spilling over as he closed the door. Philip thrived in the months following the court's decision. He threw himself into work, ensuring financial stability for his family. His evenings were spent with the children, who slowly adjusted to their new normal. Every so often, he thought of Anna, not with anger, but with a sense of finality. She had made her choices, and he had ensured she faced the consequences. For Anna, life became a cycle of survival. She found a job at a local diner, working long hours to pay off debts and save for a better apartment. The glamorous life she had once envisioned with David was a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of starting over. But with each passing day, she grew stronger. The shame and regret didn't fade, but she learned to live with them. One evening, as Anna closed up the diner, she paused to reflect on how far she had fallen. Yet, for the first time in months, she also felt a flicker of determination. She wasn't the woman she had been with Philip, nor the woman she had been with David. She was something new, someone who had been broken but was beginning to rebuild. Meanwhile, Philip sat in his study, looking through photos of his children. Their laughter filled the house, a reminder of why he had fought so hard. As he placed the photos back in their frames, he allowed himself a small smile. His life wasn't perfect, but it was stable. And that was enough. Months passed, and the winter chill began to give way to the first hints of spring. For Anna, life had settled into a humbling routine. She worked double shifts at the diner and spent her weekends with the children, who were her only solace. Despite her efforts, she couldn't shake the hollow ache of regret that lingered in her chest. The shame of her choices haunted her every waking moment, and her dreams were filled with fragments of the life she had destroyed. One Sunday afternoon, as she dropped the children off at Philip's house, Anna lingered at the door longer than usual. Philip opened it, his face calm and composed as always. The children ran inside, their laughter echoing faintly in the background. "Philip," Anna began, her voice shaky. He paused, his hand resting on the doorframe. "What is it, Anna?" She took a deep breath, tears welling in her eyes. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but I want you to know that I regret it. Every day." Philip's expression softened slightly, though his gaze remained steady. "I've forgiven you, Anna," he said quietly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. Too much has happened. It's better for all of us to move forward separately." Anna nodded, tears spilling over. "I understand," she whispered. "I just wanted you to know." Philip didn't respond, but the faintest flicker of empathy crossed his face as he closed the door. That night, Philip sat alone in his study, a glass of whiskey in his hand. The children were asleep, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. He stared at the flickering flame in the fireplace, his mind replaying Anna's apology. She had looked so different from the woman he had married, fragile and worn, like a shadow of her former self. Part of him felt vindicated, knowing she was paying the price for her betrayal. But another part, a quieter voice in the back of his mind, couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. Revenge had been satisfying in the moment, but as the months wore on, it left a hollow void. His life was stable, his children happy, but there was no denying the scars left behind by Anna's choices and his own. Philip took a long sip of his drink, letting the warmth spread through him. He had won, but at what cost? For Anna, life continued one day at a time. Slowly, she began to rebuild. She saved enough money to move into a modest apartment, a small but significant improvement from David's cramped and cluttered space. Her job at the diner became more than just a means to an end. She found camaraderie with her coworkers and a sense of purpose in the daily grind. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. One afternoon, as she walked home from work, she paused at a playground. A group of children laughed and played on the swings and slides, their joy infectious. For the first time in what felt like forever, Anna smiled, a real, genuine smile. She didn't know what the future held, but she was determined to face it head-on, no matter how difficult. Years later, Philip stood on the sidelines of his son's soccer game, cheering as the boy scored a goal. His daughter sat beside him, her sketchbook balanced on her knees as she doodled. Life had settled into a steady rhythm, and Philip had found peace in the simple joys of fatherhood and work. He rarely thought about Anna anymore. When he did, it was with a sense of closure. Their lives had diverged, and that was for the best. One evening, as he tucked his children in a bed, his daughter looked up at him and asked, "Are you happy, Dad?" Philip paused, surprised by the question. He thought about everything he had been through, the betrayal, the revenge, the rebuilding. And then he smiled, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I am," he said, "more than I ever thought I could be." Anna sat in her small apartment, a cup of tea warming her hands. The years had softened the sharp edges of her regret, though the scars remained. She had come to accept that some mistakes couldn't be undone, only lived with. Her children visited often, filling her home with laughter and love. They were her anchor, her reason for moving forward. As she looked out the window at the setting sun, she thought of Philip, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. He had been right to draw the line, to protect himself and their children. Anna closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Her life was far from what she had once dreamed, but it was hers, and that was enough.